My son tapped his champagne glass 3 times, the sound cutting through 40 conversations at once. The backyard went quiet. He stood at the head of the patio table I'd built with my own hands 17 years ago, his smile easy and confident, his wife beside him, with her arm looped through his. I sat at the far end, near the garden gate, in the folding chair someone had dragged out when the good seats ran out. He looked at the crowd, then at me, and that's when I understood this wasn't just a birthday party. This was an announcement. "Dad," he said, his voice warm and carrying, the voice of a man who knew exactly how he sounded in a crowd. "We want to thank you for everything, for this house, for this yard, for making all of this possible." Everyone turned toward me and smiled. I smiled back. My hand rested in my jacket pocket, fingers touching the edge of an envelope I'd sealed that morning. I should go back 3 months. That's where this really started. My wife passed in the spring of 2021, 2 weeks before our 38th anniversary. Pancreatic cancer, swift and merciless. The kind that gives you just enough time to say goodbye, but not enough time to make peace with it. After she was gone, the house in Tampa felt like a museum. 4 bedrooms, a screened lanai, a backyard with a brick patio. I'd laid myself during a summer I still remembered as the happiest of my adult life. We'd raised 2 kids here. I'd finished 26 years as a structural engineer here, retiring at 59 with a pension solid enough to carry me comfortably into old age. The house was paid off. My savings were healthy. My life, on paper, looked like a man who had done everything right. The problem with doing everything right is that some people look at it and see an opportunity. My son moved back in August of last year with his wife. Their apartment lease in Orlando had ended, he said. The company he worked for was restructuring, he said. Just a few months until things stabilized. I said, of course. He was my son. His wife had always been pleasant enough at holidays. A little quiet, a little watchful, but I'd never had reason to think anything of it. I made up the guest room, the large one with the ensuite bath, the one his mother used to call the company room because she always kept it perfect for visitors. Within 6 weeks, her parents had arrived. It happened the way these things always happen, gradually and then suddenly. First, it was a weekend visit that stretched into a week. Then a second week, because her father's back was acting up and the drive to their place in Gainesville was too long. Then boxes appeared in my garage. A second car in my driveway. Toiletries spreading across the bathroom counter I hadn't shared with anyone in 3 years. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself this was family. And family meant accommodation. And accommodation meant patience. I'd spent 26 years managing construction timelines and difficult clients and material shortages. I understood the value of waiting something out, but there is a difference between patience and willful blindness, and I had been walking that line without realizing it. The night I understood the difference was a Wednesday in early October. I'd driven back from dinner with an old colleague, earlier than expected, and parked down the street out of habit. The same habit I'd developed over decades of coming home late and not wanting to wake the kids. The kitchen light was on. I could see movement through the window. My son, his wife, and her parents at my kitchen table. Normal enough, except for the folder spread open between them and the way her father was pointing at papers with a pen. I stood on my own lawn, in the dark, watching. I couldn't hear the words, but I'd spent enough years reading rooms and reading people to understand the body language. My son nodding slowly, seriously. His wife marking something with a highlighter. Her father speaking with the authority of a man outlining a plan, not discussing one. Her mother, with a legal pad, writing. I went back to my car and sat for 20 minutes before I went inside. They were in the living room by then, watching television, relaxed. The folder, nowhere in sight. My son asked if I'd had a good dinner. I said it was fine. I went to bed and lay awake until 3 in the morning, thinking about what I'd seen. I called my friend the next day. We'd worked together for 15 years before he left engineering to go into real estate law, and we'd stayed in touch through his firm's holiday parties and the occasional lunch downtown. I asked if I could come by his office that afternoon. I laid it out for him the way I'd always presented project problems. Facts first, assumptions second, questions third. He listened without interrupting, which I always appreciated about him. When I finished, he turned to his computer and pulled up county property records. "You're the sole owner," he said. "Clear title, no liens, no co-ownership of any kind. You bought it in 2004 for $312,000. Current assessed value is just over $600. I wrote that down. "They have no legal claim," he continued. "They're guests. In Florida, after 30 days of continuous occupancy without a written lease or rent payments, they become tenants at will. You can terminate that with proper notice, but you have to follow the statutory process." "How long?" 15 days for tenants at will if they're not paying rent. After that, you file with the circuit court. If they contest, it can stretch to 60 days. But with proper documentation and no lease agreement, it's airtight. I wrote that down too. That afternoon, I went to my bank. I'd added my son to a savings account 4 years ago, after his mother got sick, because I'd wanted someone to have access if something happened to me. Emergency access. The same reasoning a lot of fathers use and a lot of sons test. The account manager, a young woman with the practiced sympathy of someone who'd seen this before, pulled up the transaction history. She scrolled through it quietly, then turned the screen toward me without comment. 11 months of withdrawals, cash transfers, retail charges at furniture stores, restaurant bills. 2 charges I recognized as airline tickets to Cancun, 1 to a resort hotel in Clearwater Beach. Total across 11 months, $63,400. I asked her to print the statement. She printed it without another word. Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my car and did the math I hadn't been willing to do before. 6 people were living in my house, eating food I paid for, running utilities I paid for, driving on the property I paid for, and spending the money I had set aside for the emergencies that come with being 63 years old. And my son had invited them all in and told them to make themselves comfortable. I thought about my wife. She had always said my patience was my greatest strength and my worst weakness, depending on the day. I thought she was right about both. I drove home. I smiled at everyone at dinner. I listened to her father tell a long story about a property dispute he'd once won that I was now certain contained an embedded message. I went to bed and lay awake again. But this time I wasn't confused. I was planning. The thing about working in structural engineering for 26 years is that you understand load-bearing systems. You understand that a structure can absorb stress up to a certain point, and that beyond that point, the failure is sudden and total. You also understand that if you know where the failure is going to happen, you can control it. You can choose the moment. You can make sure it happens on your terms, not under its own weight. My son's 40th birthday was 6 weeks away. He'd been planning a party at the house for months. 40 guests, a catered spread, a tent in the backyard, the whole production. He'd asked me early on if I'd help with the cost. I'd said yes. I'd meant it. I still meant it, for reasons that had nothing to do with celebrating him. I spent those 6 weeks quietly and methodically. I met with my friend twice more, reviewed the eviction statute, had him draft the formal notice with the correct statutory language. I visited 3 neighbors on my block, people who'd watched the past year unfold from their front porches and driveway conversations. All 3 had observations. One had seen her father berate me in my own driveway over the thermostat, loudly enough to hear from the sidewalk. Another had watched me carry my own groceries past the car my son had borrowed indefinitely and never returned. The third, a retired schoolteacher who'd known my wife, sat across from me at her kitchen table and said, "Raymond, I've been waiting for you to do something about this for 6 months. I asked if she'd be willing to put it in writing. She said she'd been hoping I'd ask." I filed the eviction notice with the circuit court on a Monday morning. Properly, legally, with the statutory fee and my friend's signature on every page. I didn't serve it yet. I held it. I canceled the joint account access the same afternoon. The bank flag went up immediately. My son's card declined at a gas station, then again at a restaurant. He came home confused and irritated, asked me about it at dinner. I said the bank had flagged some irregular activity and I was sorting it out. I kept my voice mild. He believed me because he had decided I was mild, and people believe what they've already decided. The party was on a Saturday. My son and his wife had done most of the organizing, which suited me fine. 40 guests, mostly their friends, a few of my old colleagues I'd invited specifically, people who knew me and who I trusted to be witnesses to a thing that needed witnesses. Catering from a local barbecue place, tables set up across the patio and lawn, string lights in the oaks. It looked like a celebration. It was a celebration, just not the kind anyone expected. Her parents had been more aggressive in the preceding weeks. Her father had started referring to the house as our place in casual conversation, correcting himself only when I looked at him directly. Her mother had rearranged my kitchen cabinets without asking, and referred to the living room furniture as what we'll replace eventually. My son had said nothing each time. His silence had told me everything I needed to know about who he had become in the past year. The party started at 5. By 7, the yard was full and warm, the way a good summer evening in Tampa settles in. Thick air, but with enough breeze off the bay to make it pleasant. I sat near the garden gate, at the edge of the gathering, watching it the way I'd watched 100 project meetings before making a decision. My son worked the crowd effortlessly, the way he always had, easy and charming. His father's son in the ways that had made me proud, and it turned out, in the ways I hadn't noticed until now. His wife stood close to her parents, the 4 of them, a small island of consultation in the middle of the party, leaning in, nodding, checking something on her phone. I watched her father glance toward me twice. Both times I looked back at him and smiled. Both times he looked away first. At 7:30, my son picked up the champagne flute someone had placed near the speaker and tapped it 3 times. The yard quieted. He began with the gratitude. For the house, for the yard, for making all of this possible. Everyone turned and smiled at me, and I smiled back. My hand was in my jacket pocket. Then he said it. Dad, I think we all know this house has been a second chance for a lot of people who needed it, and I think it's time we made that official. He looked at his wife, who nodded. Her parents nodded too, like they'd rehearsed it. Maybe they had. We've been talking about the future, about stability, about making sure the family has a foundation, and Dad has agreed, in principle, that transitioning the house into a joint ownership arrangement makes the most sense at this stage. The yard had gone quiet in a different way now. Not party quiet. Something uncertain. People looking at each other. My son looked at me across the crowd. Dad, we're grateful. Really. And we just want everyone to know that this is what the family decided together. I let the silence sit for exactly 4 seconds. I counted them. Then I stood. I buttoned my jacket the way I'd buttoned it for 26 years before walking onto job sites, calm and deliberate. I walked from the garden gate to the patio where my son was standing, and I was aware of every eye in that yard tracking my path. 40 people watching an old man walk toward his son, not sure yet what they were about to see. I stopped 3 feet from him. I took the envelope from my pocket and held it between us. Open it, I said. My son looked at the envelope, then at his wife, then at me. A small smile was still on his face, the one you wear when you think you're still in control of the situation. He took the envelope. He opened it. He unfolded the first page. The smile changed. The first page was the bank statement. $63,400 in withdrawals, 11 months, each line item printed clearly, several circled in red. His wife leaned in and looked. The color left her face by the 3rd line. What is this? He said quietly. Keep reading, I said. The second page was the property deed. Hillsborough County, recorded 2004. Sole owner, my full name, no co-signatories, no trust, no joint arrangement of any kind, current and unencumbered. I'd had my friend add a cover note. This property has never been subject to any verbal or informal agreement regarding transfer of ownership. Any such claim would have no legal standing. My son looked up from the page. The smile was gone entirely. The 3rd page was the account closure confirmation, dated 3 days prior. Joint access terminated. Notarized. The account now in my name only. The 4th page he read twice. I watched his hands. It was the eviction notice, filed with the circuit court, proper statutory language. All 6 occupants named by their legal names. 30 days to vacate the premises. Attorney signature at the bottom with the court stamp. Dad. His voice had dropped to something almost inaudible. What are you doing? I kept my voice level and clear, the way I'd learned to speak on job sites over ambient noise. The way you speak when you need everyone in the vicinity to hear you accurately. I'm clarifying a misunderstanding, I said. You just told 40 people that I agreed to transfer this house to you. I didn't. I've never had that conversation with you. What I did agree to was emergency account access, which you used to take $63,000 for furniture, restaurants, vacations, and living expenses. I paused. I also agreed to let you stay here temporarily while you got back on your feet. That was 14 months ago. Her father stepped forward from the edge of the patio. Now, just a minute. I looked at him. You're one of the named occupants, I said. You have 30 days. After that, the sheriff's office handles removal. That's the Florida statute. My attorney will confirm it. He stopped moving. My son's wife had put her hand over her mouth. My son was still holding the papers, looking at them and not at me, the way people look at something they don't want to be real. Around us, the party had become something else entirely. I could hear whispers moving through the gathered guests. A few of my old colleagues stood near the back, watching with the steady attention of people who trusted what they were seeing. I had invited them for exactly this reason. He agreed, her mother said, her voice shrill and reaching. He told us this was a family decision. He has never said that to me, I said, keeping my eyes on my son. Have you told me that? In those words? With my agreement? My son said nothing. $63,000, I continued, from an account I opened for emergencies. Medical, car trouble, actual emergencies. I have the itemized statements. The court has a copy. My attorney has a copy. I gestured to the document still in his hands. You have a copy. He set the papers down on the table. His hands were unsteady. Dad. His voice had changed again. Something younger in it now. The charm was gone. And what was underneath was someone I recognized from a long time ago. Please, can we talk about this privately? You're doing this in front of everyone. You made your announcement in front of everyone, I said. I'm just responding to it. I heard one of my neighbors, the retired school teacher I'd visited 6 weeks ago, say quietly to the woman beside her. He paid for this party. Did you know that? He paid for all of it. I turned and walked back toward the garden gate. I'd said what needed to be said and shown what needed to be shown. The rest was consequence, which doesn't require supervision. Behind me, her father was raising his voice. Her mother was crying, with the theatrical precision of someone who'd rehearsed it as a strategy. My son was still standing at the patio table with the papers, and I could hear guests asking questions, voices overlapping, the sound of a story spreading in real time. I went inside. I sat in my kitchen in the dark and drank a glass of water, and I thought about the 26 years I'd paid this mortgage, and the backyard I'd built by hand, and my wife, who would have told me to do this 6 months ago. The party broke up quickly after that. The next days were loud in the way that final things are loud before they go quiet. My son knocked on my bedroom door the first morning, then the second, then the third. I told him through the door that there was nothing to discuss, and that the statutory timeline was in effect. His wife called my cell phone 16 times over 4 days. I let every call go to voicemail. Her father tried a different approach. He came to me the 4th evening with a formal expression and a printed letter, which he explained was from an attorney in Gainesville who specialized in family property disputes. He laid it on the kitchen table and said they had grounds for a claim of equitable interest based on substantial improvement contributions to the property. I looked at the letter. Then I looked at him. I know every improvement made to this property, I said. I made them. I have permits, receipts, and contractor records going back to 2004. What have you contributed to this house? He didn't answer. 30 days, I said, starting from the date on the notice. He took the letter and left the kitchen. My friend filed the formal response to their attorney's letter in 48 hours. 3 pages of property records, permit history, receipts, and a single paragraph noting that the attorney's claim rested on contributions that did not appear in any county record. The attorney in Gainesville withdrew the letter by the following Friday. The social media post appeared on a Tuesday. My son's wife put it up in the early afternoon, and by evening it had been shared over 3,000 times. I watched the notifications pile up on my phone from a former colleague's text alerting me, and then I opened it. A photograph of her, artfully composed, the caption running for paragraphs, words like abandoned and homelessness and abuse of power, the story she had constructed where I was a bitter old man who had turned on his family without cause. I took screenshots. Then I went to her profile and scrolled back 9 months. She had not been careful about her public posts because she had not expected anyone to look. I found 37 posts that predated the eviction notice. Designer shopping bags with cheerful captions. Vacation photos tagged at the resort in Clearwater Beach, charged to my account. Complaints about old man thermostat drama. A post about a new sectional sofa with the comment, "Grateful for generous family." A restaurant check-in at a steakhouse downtown, captioned, "Living our best life." I saved every one before she deleted them. She deleted them by the next morning. I already had them archived. The circuit court hearing was scheduled for mid-November. I sat in the gallery while my friend presented the case with the methodical precision he'd developed over 2 decades of property law. He placed the bank statements on the evidence table. He placed the social media screenshots beside them. The cheerful posts that predated the eviction. The same posts that had now been deleted from the profile currently claiming poverty and abuse. He placed the 3 sworn neighbor statements, each one describing specific incidents of verbal disrespect witnessed independently. He placed the property deed. Unambiguous. Unencumbered. 20 years of sole ownership. The judge was a careful man. Methodical, the kind who reads everything before opening his mouth. He looked through the documentation for a long time before looking up. "Counselor," he said to my son's wife's attorney, "your clients claim equitable interest and hardship. The documentation I'm looking at shows 2 years of discretionary spending on the plaintiff's accounts." He held up one of the bank statement pages. Vacation travel, luxury dining, retail furniture. These are not the financial records of people in hardship. These are the records of people who were spending someone else's money on their own comfort. Her attorney began a response. The judge stopped him. "And the social media posts." He looked at the printed screenshots. "Your client claims she was living in poverty and fear. Her public posts show her at resort hotels and upscale restaurants, using language like living our best life. I'm having difficulty reconciling these 2 accounts." He made his ruling in plain language. Eviction upheld. Occupants to vacate within 10 days. Costs awarded to me. My son looked at me once from across the courtroom. I looked back. I didn't look away first, and neither did he. And after a moment the bailiff moved between us, and it was done. They moved out on a gray Tuesday morning in late November. I parked down the street, the same spot I'd parked that October night. I first understood what was happening. My friend sat in the passenger seat, not because I needed legal counsel, just because he was a good man who understood when someone shouldn't be alone. The moving truck arrived at 8. Her parents were the most organized, which made sense. They'd had more practice at this. My son carried boxes with the grim efficiency of someone doing a job he hated. His wife directed from the driveway, not making eye contact with the street or with the neighbors I saw watching from 2 porches down. Her father stopped at my car window. He walked over slowly, and I lowered the window halfway. "You'll be alone," he said. "An old man in a big house. Alone. I hope you know what you've chosen." I looked at him without anger, because I didn't feel anger. "I've chosen my house," I said. "That seems right." He had nothing to say to that. He turned and walked back to the truck. My son came out last, carrying a box. He set it in the truck bed and then stood on the lawn for a moment, looking at the house. Then he walked to my car. Slowly. I didn't lower the window further. He stopped at the door and looked through the glass. I lowered the window. "Dad," he said. His voice was different from anything I'd heard from him in over a year. The performance was gone. I don't know how to explain what happened. I don't know how to explain who I was letting myself become. I waited. "I'm not asking you to fix it," he continued. "I know it's too late for that. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For all of it. For what I said at the party. For the money. For not being he stopped. For not being who you raised me to be. I sat with that for a moment. 26 years of raising a son, of school pickups and homework at the kitchen table, and teaching him to drive in the church parking lot on Sunday mornings when the lot was empty. I thought about the man my wife had hoped he would become. You made choices, I said. So did I. Now we both live in the houses those choices built. I paused. Whether you rebuild yours is up to you. Not me. You. He nodded once. He stepped back from the car. He looked at the house one more time. The brick patio, the oaks in the backyard, the screened lanai where he'd spent summers as a kid. And then he turned and got into his car, and the convoy pulled out of my driveway. I sat until the truck turned the corner and disappeared. Then I pulled forward and parked in my own driveway. Inside, the damage was real, but not catastrophic. The hardwood floors had scuff marks from furniture moved carelessly. A cabinet hinge in the kitchen had been ripped loose. 3 picture frames were gone from the hallway, along with a set of tools from the garage and a small television I'd had in the guest room. Enough to register, not enough to destroy, but it was quiet. For the first time in 14 months, my house was quiet in the way a house is when it belongs to only one person. I called the locksmith. I called the security company. By evening, new locks were on every door. Cameras were mounted at the front and back, and the control panel in my bedroom showed every entrance in clean green status. I walked through each room, testing doors, checking windows, and then I sat on the lanai in the dark with a glass of tea and listened to the neighborhood settle around me. A lawn sprinkler ran somewhere down the block. A dog barked twice and stopped. A car passed slowly. Normal life. Exactly what it had been before 14 months ago. Restored. My neighbor, the retired school teacher, called the next morning. I saw them leave, she said. I wanted to make sure you were all right. I'm all right, I said. Your wife would be proud of you, she said. I want you to know that, I thanked her. I held the phone a little longer after we hung up. My son called 6 weeks later. Not to ask for anything, not to negotiate. He called on a Sunday afternoon, and when I answered, he said only that he and his wife had separated, that he was living in a 1-bedroom in Ybor City, that he was working and paying his own bills, and that he had started talking to someone, a counselor, because he wanted to understand how he had become the person he'd been in my house. I asked how he was doing. He said it was hard. I said hard was usually honest. We talked for 45 minutes. Not about the money, not about the house, not about any of it. Just talked. The way we used to talk before any of this started. Before something had shifted in him that I hadn't caught in time to prevent. When we hung up, I didn't know what came next for him or for us. I still don't. I know this. I am 63 years old. I live in a house I paid for with 26 years of work. My wife's garden still blooms in the backyard in the spring because I maintained it the way she taught me. The patio I laid by hand is still solid, still level, because I used good materials and I didn't rush. The kitchen has a new cabinet hinge, correctly installed, because some things are worth fixing properly. There are things I can't fix and didn't try to. There are mistakes I made in the years of being too patient and too accommodating, in letting comfort become a subsidy for people who mistook it for their right. My wife used to say, I collected obligations the way other men collected hobbies, always adding, never subtracting, never asking whether the thing I was carrying was worth the weight. I understand now what she meant. I'm not a man who values isolation. I'm not a man who wanted this outcome. I would have preferred a different story. One where my son looked at what he was becoming and turned around without needing a courtroom to show him the wall. But I've spent 63 years in the world of load-bearing structures. And I know this with the certainty of someone who has seen what happens when you ignore a failing joint and what happens when you don't. Justice isn't always swift. It isn't always clean. Sometimes it looks like a father sitting at the end of his own patio in a folding chair, watching a plan unfold, holding an envelope, waiting for exactly the right moment to set the record straight. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a patient man can do is finally stop being patient. If this story reached you, if it found you on a day when you needed to hear it, leave a comment below and tell me where you're listening from. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. And if you know someone who needed to hear this today, please share it with them.